From a project management standpoint, what makes marine and geostructural projects fundamentally more complex than traditional vertical building projects?
The thing with any geostructural project is that you have so many unknowns. The challenge is you don't have a good handle of how the ground conditions are. You don't know where the groundwater is. So that's the basic challenge with any of these geostructural projects. So a very good example, I think, to illustrate the point is we were doing a
What if the biggest risks on your project are the ones you can't see? In marine and geostructural work, project managers are often building on soil conditions that are only partially known, where one unexpected discovery underground can impact costs, schedule, and stakeholder confidence overnight. These projects demand a different level of planning, coordination, and leadership than your typical vertical build. In this episode, I'll be talking with Manik Jainn, PE PMP Marine and Coastal Resiliency Northeast Team Lead at Kiewit. With more than 12 years of experience leading complex infrastructure and design build projects, Manik brings a practical perspective on managing excavation risks, aligning multidisciplinary teams, and making confident decisions when field conditions don't match the plan. We'll discuss what PMs often overlook early in the waterfront and deep excavation projects, how to plan for uncertainty without over-engineering the budget, and how to lead teams through unexpected site changes without losing momentum. If you're responsible for delivering complex infrastructure projects, especially where uncertainty is high, this is the episode that will give you a clearer framework for managing risks, strengthening coordination, and improving outcomes. Before we jump in, I want to tell you about AEC PM Connect, the premier event series for AEC leaders and project managers looking to elevate team performance, lead with purpose, and deliver measurable results. Across multiple locations each year, you'll explore real-world strategies for project delivery, leadership, and technology in construction management. Our next event takes place in New Jersey in June and Kansas City in October. You can learn more and register at aecpmconnect.com. I'm your host, Fiona Johan, and this is the AEC Project Management Podcast. Let's jump right in. So now it is time for our PM Conversation of the Week with Manik Jainn, PE PMP. Manik, welcome to the AEC Project Management Podcast.
Thank you, Fiona. I appreciate it. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. We're so happy to have you here. I thought we could first start with you telling us what first drew you into marine and geostructural engineering, and how did that path lead you into leading these complex infrastructure projects?
So yeah, that's an interesting deep down into my sort of career. So it started off with Cornell. I went to do my master's there with the classic skyscraper dream. Get on, do the fancy looking superstructures, tall structures. But what I didn't know back then was how the things that you don't see sort of influences to the structural design. So I took a class with my professor, Thomas Arup, great professor, and that really exposed me into the retaining structures and slope design. So that one course exposed me to all that we have, or as a basics for all the retaining structures, supportive excavations, marine structures, bulkhead. So that was what it started out. And then I moved to Mutual Rutledge. That's where I started my career. So it's a small boutique firm in Manhattan. And then they do a lot of support of excavation, substructures, work. So that also was a good starting point for my career. And then being in Manhattan always is a perk because that's where you need it the most. You could have a skyscraper, then you could have an empty lot, and then you can have a skyscraper. So you have to be very careful what you do if you are doing any basement. You don't want to damage or cause any issues to your neighbor's foundation. So it started off with smaller projects, easier projects, as we call it, and then it goes to complicated projects, bigger projects. One thing that was very helpful in my career early on was going to the site, like getting exposed to the field experience, seeing how things are being done. So that really helped me out in where I am today.
That's great. I always love a story where it's very common. Someone's like, "Oh, I thought I was going X, Y, and Z," and then there's this course that just opened the world to me. And I think that's just
True.
so important to remember. Like that's what the college experience is about, is like having all
Exactly.
that exposure so you can find your niche.
Right.
Strong project outcomes need skilled managers and confident leaders. EMI's corporate training delivers expert-led courses in project management and people leadership, plus industry-recognized certification and exclusive premium content to take your team even further. Elevate your team's leadership capabilities today. Visit engineeringmanagementinstitute.org and click on corporate training.
So, from a project management standpoint, what makes marine and geostructural projects fundamentally more complex than traditional vertical building projects?
Right. So that's an interesting question, right? Because I always, the way I would like to answer it is you come back to your PM triangle, right? You have your cost, you have your schedule, and then you have your scope. And then at the intersection, you have your quality. The thing with any geostructural project is that you have so many unknowns, right? The challenge is you don't have a good handle of how the ground conditions are. You don't know where the groundwater is. You don't have a good example or like a set template of how or what you should expect. So that's the basic challenge with any of these geostructural projects. So a very good example, I think, to illustrate the point is we were doing a deep excavation project in Manhattan, and what it was that we did our initial geotech investigation, and based on the investigation, it was formed to have like soil over rock. And the goal was to do the excavation, do 2-level deep basement, and then have a sky rise on it. But when you actually started to excavate, you found out that you have a certain portion of the site whereas rock is much higher than you anticipated. So now what that does to your whole project is that it's a change in schedule because drilling rock, it requires line drilling or something special that completely throws your original schedule out of the window, and it could mean significant delay. It's more cost, and obviously it's a change condition, so it's a different scope altogether. So that's why like dealing with these projects is tricky in that sense. And then also you always want to look at your means and methods for projects like this. Having like a good site access, do you have access to do what you want and how you want to get there? So that's where the contractor means and methods come sort of dictate the design. And if you, let's say if you're doing work in water, then you have very limited options to sort of verify your design, because if you're doing it from the water side, it's hard to take those accurate measurements. You will be influenced by the tidals, right? The high tides, the low tides. So all of those things do make these projects much more challenging than your conventional projects. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. It sounds like you guys are probably leaning really hard into the risk management piece of like the known unknowns and the unknown unknowns all day.
Exactly. Yeah. That's pretty much it. Because you'll always have something that you didn't think about, right?
Hmm.
Or like why is it at there? So that's
Yeah.
always the challenge.
That's so interesting because, that's one of the things we teach at EMI is a lot about risk management. And that is, it sounds like you are probably a pro at that. Maybe you should come teach a course for us. Because that sounds like you have all sorts of different risks that probably pop up by
We
surprise all
do,
the
we
time.
do. So we do have to maintain a very good risk register of all these things, what you think could come up, right? And then have like real contingencies based on that, right? It could be contingent in terms of schedule, a different design option. So all of that. So yeah, absolutely, you're correct. We do have to do that.
So, along those lines, when you're planning a project that involves these deep excavations or waterfront structures, what should project managers be thinking about early that they're often overlooking?
Yeah. So I guess the answer is trying to get a handle of the unknown, which is always easier said than done, but trying to get a good handle of what your ground conditions are, right? How is your access to the site, and how is your production with the subcontractors? What tolerances they can achieve? Uh, what are your adjacent properties that you want to protect with what you're trying to do? So getting a good handle of that is very important. And then your subs also have a good say. Then certain tolerances or certain things that they cannot meet. So you want to make sure that you have that early in your plan taken care of. Now, from the PM mindset, it's the same thing, right? Try to get a very good handle of your existing condition, get a good sense of what your construction sequence is going to look like, and then look at the project from a total risk perspective, right? Not what the budget is, but the option which can get you to the least risk with a reasonable budget is a better approach in our sense to look at that way. And then from other PM tools that you do want to use is absolutely you want to have a good stakeholder engagement plan. Make sure who your stakeholders are, how do you communicate with them, because that's where rifts can come. That if you don't have that expectation set up very well, right? You want to have your resource and staffing plan where you have the right teams leading the project, and then even the technical leads in their project should have someone that they can ask questions to. Like, so the way we do it is we have like a technical sponsor who is above a lead, but basically you can run things by him. So there's always someone, if you're working in a bigger organization, who has done this work before. So make sure you reach out to them that if you have any questions, and then get their help in. And then the last piece would be like the quality management. So make sure you have the QA QC procedures in place to sort of take care of anything that you might have missed.
So you mentioned, having an expert. What other things are you doing to balance the technical rigor of these real world projects and the constructability and contractor input?
Right. So again, starting off with a great team is a big asset. Absolutely. So that's fundamental, right? You want to have like good and repeatable processes so that the outcome is not just like dependent on a person, but you have a good sort of team and process so that can take care of itself. But that being said, you want to have or start with like a good basis of design. So when you're talking from like an engineering and design side, you want to have a good technical document which basically lists all your assumptions, be very explicit with your assumptions, and then what conditions you're assuming. And then from the geotechnical side, you want to have a good geotechnical baseline report. We call it GBR. And the goal there is to document your existing conditions to the best known to date. And then that becomes your contractual document too, because then you have a baseline. If anything changes, now that's a change contract from that standpoint onward. So that's something that really helps you. And then most of the time, what we see on these jobs is that schedule is being the driver rather than the design itself. So you have to have like very clear things in your project plan that if anything goes wrong, like how do you want to address it? So again, like prioritize on your big risk items, right? And then have a good contingency plan in place. So
So when
I think,
I think you
yeah,
just started to hit on something I was interested in asking you about is, you know, unexpected field conditions will arise,
right.
right? And so how are you leading your team through those decision-making processes without slowing the project down? Because we were just talking about how important that schedule is.
True. So there is always certain a good sort of tension between the design side and the construction side. Obviously, construction do want things as quickly as possible, so you have to meet that demand. But you do have to make those decisions quickly because they're waiting for you to do that. So the one way we do that is you do have dedicated ESDC folks, which are like engineering services during construction, engineering services during construction, correct? We like to use acronyms a lot, so that's what ESDC is. And then this becomes important when you have certain conditions. So let me give you an example. if you're doing a earth retaining system and then you have a lot of tiebacks in there, and then you're drilling through an existing old facility, that you could have existing buried structures in there. So you have to be very careful on when you are drilling that you don't hit anything. And then that also means that you do have to study your old drawings as existing drawings to the best of your knowledge. But sometimes you will see conditions that you haven't thought about. So at that point, you want to have a very clear escalation path. And then how from that escalation path, you want to get in with your contractor who has seen that stuff, get in with your technical subs, come up with a plan of action, and then make sure it's validated by your contractor that yes, it's actually feasible, and then go out and implement it. So that usually helps us. And then other thing as a preemptive measure you can take is that have like a senior ESDC person out there who can make some of the decisions on the field. So a lot of change conditions can be anticipated or be taken care of during the field personnel. Obviously, for a major change, you do have to go back to the design team, but absolutely they can take care of some of the stuff.
Yeah, I like that because it
So yeah,
sounds like that would help align your team, right? Between your geotechnical engineers, your structural engineers, and your construction teams. That's how we can avoid some of those risks falling through the cracks, is what I'm hearing. Great. What a wealth of information. So let me ask you one thing I like to ask everybody. From someone inside a firm, if firm leaders are listening today, what's one thing they can improve to strengthen project outcomes on complex infrastructure projects, and where should they start?
so our industry, the way our industry is shaping right now, we do see a lot of young talent not coming to our industry. So there is a little bit of decline or at least stagnation in the new recruits that we are having. And the other thing that I see is there is a disconnect. So the disconnect when I talk about is the younger folks who are coming in, they have a different mindset of everything that can be done with the software tools that you have, and AI lets you run your calculations with it, versus you have an old school mindset where your thought process is that I really have to do it by hand to know it. So the answer lies somewhere in the middle, or having a very good path for the older generation to sort of transfer that knowledge to the younger folks. And I guess to be able to do that, you need a very strong culture in a company where you can freely ask any questions. I see a lot with the younger folks that even if you're a master's, you could have a simple question, but you're not going to ask it just because, hey, I'm a master. I should better know this. Let me just not ask it and just forget about it, right? You can stay quiet in a room. But I guess the onus is on the leaders to make a culture where, hey, I don't know this, but I want to learn this is acceptable. And I guess once you have that culture, then you can see a lot of the knowledge transfer happening. And that's where your teams could really strengthen. You could really build like strong teams that way.
I love that. Culture is so important, especially when we're in a space where people can feel open to ask those questions. Because at the end of the day, that comes down to safety, right? Like if you're not asking
Correct.
those questions because you don't want to look dumb in front of the group, then at the, 5 years down the road, maybe you not having the answer to that question is kind of a big deal. So I love that. And
Absolutely.
creating that safe culture to ask the questions is so crucial, especially as leadership setting that tone of asking questions like, hey, actually, I don't know how you guys are doing this. Can you fill me in on that? To bring that culture together. I love that. Well, thank you so much
Right.
for joining us. That was great. Do you have anything else you want to share with any project managers listening?
No, it's a great field to be in. You do work on very exciting and rewarding projects. So I absolutely love that, and love to be around with the folks who do this all the time. So that's all. And just be out there, and you'll figure it out. One thing that, or actually two things that I've learned from a lot of folks that work in my industry is, one thing, always try to find someone who has done this before. because there's nothing you are doing out there that is like, hey, no one has ever done this before. It's going to be rare. I mean, you could have that situation, but that's going to be rare.
Yeah.
So always try to seek help, and that, especially in our field, really helps you in making a good versus bad decision.
And that is wonderful advice. I will strongly back that as a project manager. I often remind myself that I don't have many original thoughts if you think about all the world, right? Like somebody out there has done this before. So let's find
That's
them
true.
and figure it out.
Yeah, that's the beauty of being in our industry, right?
Yeah.
You know the things around you and you see the things around you, so you know what's out there.
Yeah. It's the ultimate teamwork if it's all working out well.
That's true. That's true.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us. It has been a pleasure chatting with you, and hopefully we cross paths again.
Absolutely. Thank you, Fiona. It was a pleasure talking to you. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
You too. Please remember, you can find the show notes for this episode at aecpmpodcast.com. There you'll find a summary of key points discussed in today's episode, as well as links to any of the resources, websites, or books mentioned during this episode. Until next time, I wish you the best in all your project management endeavors.